I'm so excited, just can't hide it. Dancing. Howdy doody, buckaroonies. Sometimes I like to sit back and think about the 8 great wonders of this strange little blue dot that we call home. Things like the Great Pyramids, or people who actually enjoy eating at Olive Garden, people who don't put their shopping carts away when they're done using them, going hiking to get closer to nature and throwing away your plastic water bottle on the ground when it's empty, not leaving Brittany alone, my wife's uncanny ability to always be correct, Trisha Paytas being famous for sitting on her floor and crying, and my dog, who is like the size of a football but somehow able to clear an entire room with a single fart. When I'm not busy sitting around pondering the big questions in life, I'm usually found noodling around with my favorite synthesizers, and my friends over at Arturia have just dropped the new V Collection 8, a big old bag of goodies to let 2020 go out with a bang. Arturia also offered to sponsor a giveaway of 1 copy of the V Collection 8. If you want to enter to win, you can find more information in my Discord. You can join that with the link down in the description. Today, we'll be exploring everything new in the Arturia V Collection 8, a huge grab bag of dozens of the most iconic synthesizers of all time with excellent sound quality, a bunch of cool updates to make them a bit more fun and usable for modern productions, and enough sounds and features to make your head spin for years to come. If you are at all into vintage sounds and vintage synthesizers and you don't want to sell a lot of your major organs to finance purchasing the real things, I think the V Collection is one of the best investments you can make for your studio and for your music. Otherwise, if you're into retro synths but maybe not super keen on sound design and patching things yourself, there is an update to the Analog Lab software as well, which gives you a huge amount of presets from all of these synthesizers and a couple of handy macros to tweak the sounds and make them fit your productions. Like I said, today we're only going to be exploring the things that are new in V Collection 8 to give them their fair share of the spotlight, but if you want to see everything else that is included in the V Collection, you can check out my video on V Collection 7 for over an hour of exhaustive exploration. You ready to get started, Callie? All right.
Welcome to the Arturia V Collection 8.
First up here, we have the OBXAV. Now, this is actually not new. This was released previously, but it is now included in V Collection 8. So I wanted to get this one out of the way first because I think we've all kind of heard about this one already. So, some information about this thing. The OBXA was released back in 1980 and cost somewhere between $4,500 to $5,500 depending on which model you picked. Today, these usually go for somewhere between $8,000 to $10,000 depending on the condition. The OBXA and that Oberheim sound is just kind of the poly sound of the 80s, and it was used on tons of major releases and continues to be a popular choice for synthesizers today with pop and electronic artists. One of the big things with the OBXA was its ability to not only create these huge lush sounds, but also split and stack the voices together, resulting in this big wall of synthesizer sound that I think we just kind of associate with the era. The OBXA gives you that rich, lush Oberheim sound in a very accessible form. I think this is a very musician-friendly addition to the V Collection because it's hard to get a bad sound out of this thing, unlike maybe the Matrix 12, which can be a bit deep and tedious to program. This is a lot more straightforward and just a lot of fun to use. One of the other cool things is the cross modulation here, which was actually not part of the OBXA, but that was a part of the OBX. So this is kind of a nice hybrid between the two, with the extra Arturia thoughtfulness here, where we can access the stereo settings, the pan settings, we get a mod matrix, we get some nice modulation, some nice effects, and just a really usable, solid sounding synthesizer. So now the big question, what does this thing sound like? For every synth in this video, I've prepared a track using only 8 tracks for the Arturia V Collection 8, using only the sounds from that synthesizer with no additional post-processing. So there's nothing else going on here but the OBXA, and that's the same for all the other synths. And then I've got a vintage warmer on the master just to use as a limiter. So let's take a listen.
Stage 73.
One of the other new things in V Collection 8 here is an update to the Stage 73 V, so I just wanted to kind of quickly show this because it is worth talking about. Personally, I didn't really mind the sound of the original. I actually used it quite a bit, but I guess I didn't really know what I was missing until I heard this. The Stage 73 is based on the Fender Rhodes, which back in the day cost around $700 or $1,200 for the suitcase version. Today, you can find them for around the same price. They held their value pretty well, but they're not all that rare. They can be a bit tedious to maintain, but they do sound good and are still really popular. This new update sounds really, really good and feels a lot more responsive to play. It just, I don't know, it feels a lot more like the real thing, and it's very hard to describe unless you've actually played one of these. With just the way that you play the keys has a pretty big impact on the final sound. This also gains the new macro controls down here, as well as an updated interface and a new sound. So this is a lot smaller than the original version. You can pop between stage and suitcase really easy. In the advanced tab, we get to dive into the models and tunings and all the other kind of little tiny tedious bits of things. And in the effects section, this now pulls up everything for the pedals and amp and stuff, which I think is nice because before they were really small and kind of annoying to work with. So I mostly kind of flip through presets, but this makes it a lot more accessible to dial in some effects and stuff. So let's give it a spin for a couple presets and see what it sounds like.
Rock the shock and rock is the Jupiter 8.
Here we have the Jupiter 8V, which is also not new, but got an update. But the update was so significant that I feel like it really deserved a segment in this video because it feels like a brand new synth. Like the Stage 73, the Jupiter 8 received a new interface and a new sound engine, which is just incredible. The original, to me, sounded really good, but this makes me feel like, again, I was just totally missing out because this just sounds so much better. So this is the Roland Jupiter 8, and I'm sure you know what this is. So this thing cost about $5,000 when it came out, and today would set you back somewhere between $15,000 to $20,000. This is probably one of the most iconic synthesizers ever of all time, probably due to its extremely well thought out interface and just massively rich and deep sound. I think Arturia really knocked it out of the park with this update. This sounds so much better, the interface is really nice, and we've got these new features with the macros and the modulations and stuff that really just takes this thing up to a whole nother level. So what does it sound like, you might ask? Here we have my 8-track song using only the sound of the Jupiter 8. Let's take a listen.
Oh my god, it's the Juno 6.
Now, new in the V Collection 8 is this bad boy. This is the Juno 6. Now, you might question why this was added if there was a Jupiter 8, because the Juno is just the Jupiter, but different, right? Well, no. This guy came in at around $1,700 and costs about the same now depending on the condition, making it a fairly accessible synthesizer outside of some of the more exotic and expensive things in the V Collection. The Juno brought the Jupiter to the masses in a way by taking this giant thing and packing it into a more affordable format, but featured a kind of reimagined feature set and was redesigned to make it a unique product that was worth picking up while capturing a little bit of that Jupiter magic. Arturia really did a good job with this thing. I think it sounds very, very close to the original with that Arturia secret sauce that they put in their stuff, even down to the chorus noise, which can be toggled on and off here, which is subtle, but a nice, welcome addition. And I like, though, that unlike some of the other Juno emulations out there, it's not trying to really be that one-to-one recreation, but actually takes it and makes it a bit more fun to play around with. So, the sound of the new Juno 6V. This is my track. Let's take a listen.
Emulator 2.
Here we have the Emulator 2 V. This is probably what I was most excited for when I downloaded V Collection 8 and was easily probably one of the #1 requests I had for a future update to the V Collection. This thing came out in 1984 and is one of the coolest looking bits of gear out there, I think, and has an equally awesome sound to match. This thing featured a 27.7 kilohertz sample rate, making it one of the best sample units at the time, and in a way is kind of like the primitive cousin of a lot of workstations or like a hardware version of something like Kontakt, because there were actually a lot of third-party libraries available for this thing, which was kind of one of the first forays into the sample library market, which is just kind of interesting. Back in the day, this thing cost about $8,000 or about $10,000 for the Plus version, which had some extra features and stuff, and today can actually be found for a lot cheaper. You can find these for around $1,500 to $3,000 depending on the condition and stuff, and I think that's in part because they're just not that great. It's really not amazing sounding, but it is really coming back in vogue with kind of the revival of all things 80s that we seem to be seeing for whatever reason. This was used on the soundtrack for Terminator 2, which is like one of the best soundtracks ever. It was used by John Carpenter, and it was used all over the 80s for a lot of hit records and soundtracks and everything else in between, and just has a really cool vibe to it. Kind of like the CMI, you can dive in on the screen here and really get deep into this thing. You've got individual filters, you've got layers here, we can do velocity and key splits, we can go in and assign everything across the keyboard, which is really nice to create some more complex patches. You can import your own samples, which is awesome to get that crusty emulator feel out of something, or just run sound through it and see what happens. There's voice effects. You can actually add an effect to just that voice, which is kind of cool and pretty powerful. There's a DAC control mode, so you can go vintage for that crappy sound or modern for a bit of better sound quality. LFO, VCA, filters, you get the idea. We've got some effects here, so we've got 3 effects, just like the other stuff. We've got the new macro system. All around, a pretty fun thing to use, and I think a bit more sensible than something like the CMI or the Synclavier. So what does this thing sound like? Here I've got my track for Emulator 2 using only 8 tracks. This is the only track that has some additional processing. There's an instance of Replicant 2 here on the drums. It just sounded too good to not add, so that's the only thing that's going on otherwise. Let's take a listen. Finally, that brings us to the Vocoder V here, which is the final thing that is new in V Collection 8. This is what was used to make those fun little vocoder intercut parts. This is based on the Moog Vocoder 16 channels. Patchable Vocoder came out in 1978. I have no idea how much this thing originally cost. I couldn't find anything about it because it was recently reissued, so no idea what this cost back in the day. Today, this thing will set you back about $5,000 for the reissue, or $10,000 to $15,000 for an actual vintage unit. So this thing is pretty straightforward. It's a poly vocoder with a patchable matrix, which is what you see up here. So we can just click and drag to make a connection, and it's really that easy. So that's pretty much all there is to that, I guess. There's an ensemble effect over here, which actually sounds really good. There's FM capabilities, there's different waveforms and stuff, and all around it's capable of a pretty wide variety of classic vocoder-y patches. Now, this thing, in my opinion, doesn't really stand up to some of the modern vocoding solutions with things like Vocodex or whatever, but it does give you that kind of Moog vocoder vibe without needing to sell a kidney to get the actual hardware version, and does a good job of just making vocoder sounds. You can also play this thing just as a synthesizer with just the synth engine, but I think that's kind of beside the point and not really all that exciting. It has a bunch of presets here that have some samples built in, so we've got like some bells, some nice bass sounds, some cool keys, and a whole bunch of other stuff. There's also some vocal things in here, so we can do a few French words. And stuff like that. We can go in here and edit these samples, so there's multiple samples we can add in here. You can also use your voice input as well, so that's what I did here to make the kind of intercuts, so we can hop into the settings here and go to the tutorials, go down to your routing help. So this just tells me it's gonna load some tutorial patch, and here's how you route this to set it up in your DAW to use as an actual vocoder with a live input, which is a lot of fun to explore with your voice or just other sounds you have lying around. So to get a better sense of what this thing sounds like, I guess we'll pop through a couple of presets and check them out, and that kind of wraps it up for this one because it's pretty straightforward. And there you have it, everything new in the Arturia V Collection 8. This is available right now, and if you want to check it out for yourself, you can find more information with the link down in the description below. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed it, and as always, I hope you learned something. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon.